You are listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am Reverend Jennie Adams from Holy Trinity Prince Consort Road in South Kensington.
And I am the Reverend Mark Adams from St Margaret's Church in Barking. There you go. I had a little bit of a moment there. We're back. We're back.
We are.
We had a couple of weeks with kind of going away, getting ready to go away. But now we're here again with another conversation with Jennie and Mark, raring to go. So yeah, how was Easter, Jennie?
Easter seems so far away now. But it was good. It was good. I mean, he is risen.
Indeed. Indeed, he is.
But yeah, it does seem a long time ago. It's funny how easily we slip back into our old routines, which is actually why
Although, of course, we are still very much in Easter tide.
Yeah.
So okay. I think it'll be interesting to see whether we can reflect some of that in our readings today, I think. But yeah, we're still in Easter tide for another good few weeks yet. There's about 7 weeks of Easter tide up to Pentecost.
You can't have too much of a good thing, can you?
Absolutely. That's true.
So this week,
you're not preaching.
I'm not preaching, no.
I am.
So which
all help required. I'm looking for all of Jennie's really good ideas. I can basically nick from this conversation in order to be able to preach on Sunday. That's the plan. That's my plan. But anyway, there you go.
Should have gone with Acts then.
All of your wisdom. So we're going to look at the reading from John 10, the gospel reading for this week, John 10, 22 to 30. And Jennie, I think you're going to read that for us, yeah?
I will, yeah. When it comes up, there we go. At that time, the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus answered, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." So.
Okay.
We missed a great bit where the Jews then pick up stones to stone him for it.
Well, I must admit, I was looking at this yesterday and thought, you've really got to read on another verse, which is they basically took up stones to kill him, really, because
they asked him the question, they goaded him to say that, that he was God, and then wanted to stone him.
That's true.
But we do miss out a key verse, I think, but
yeah. Well, maybe I might add that in for my reading on Sunday. I don't know, because I think you're right. It sort of it kind of gives the story another edge, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you're seeing it completely in context if you don't have that. I mean, it was the whole reason for asking him, really.
So that's interesting, isn't it? I think that's an interesting point to kick off on, really. That how long? Tell us plainly. I want you to tell us plainly. Are you the if you are the Messiah, tell us. And I suppose in a way, though, he goes further than that, doesn't he?
Yes, but all they needed was the answer yes, didn't they? That's all they were asking.
We obviously, because we're Christians, and 2,000 years of creeds and councils and stuff, that came to this conclusion that yes, we believe that Jesus is God incarnate. And actually, this is a pretty strong verse to support that, isn't it? That is Jesus's self-understanding, especially the final verse, the Father and I are one. And perhaps we'll come back to some of the other stuff in a minute. But just on that, I think, that's a pretty clear statement from Jesus there. But that doesn't necessarily, but they don't necessarily have an expectation that the Messiah is going to be God incarnate, do they? Or do they? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what their understanding of the Messiah was going to be. Apart from all singing and all dancing, coming in all guns blazing, and he hasn't done that.
Yeah.
I don't actually know enough about Jewish understanding, I don't think, of what
it'd
they
be
were
interesting to maybe but they're certainly not happy, are they? With the tell us plainly. He says basically, yes, I am, and I'm one with the Father. And I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? If we saw someone saying that, how would we react? I
Oh, we
always
think
think
they were
that's
mad.
a really good
We think
question.
they were mad. I mean, we've had them in society, haven't we? You know, that all think they are God. So we've had these people, and we just write them off as mental health problems. But this is more than that, isn't it, though? Because it's not just because they think he's got some issues. You know, it's blasphemy. It's like it's outrageous, which is why they need to stone him. Need to.
Although actually, if you read on, he just carries on having a conversation with them. In fact, so they kind of maybe they've just got the rocks there. It just makes a high stakes conversation, but
I think he just ties them in knots. I think they have to be very sure before they stone somebody that he has said something directly, which is why I tell us plainly. It can't be
yeah.
misinterpreted, can it?
So there's a
Otherwise, they're going to be in
fascinating
trouble.
kind of there is a fascinating conversation here, isn't there, between the Jewish leaders, the scribes, Pharisees, whatever, which is how I'm interpreting the Jews here, and Jesus, really. I think because it is this thing about which comes to all sorts of things of faith in a way, doesn't it? Tell us, give us a sign or tell us plainly. Well, I have told you and you don't believe me, and I'm going to tell you again and you still don't believe me. So Jesus telling them is not satisfying there because it doesn't fit, I guess, within their preconceived ideas of what the
No, and
Messiah
we
should be
probably
or how
see
he should
that. We
operate
see
or
that in our. We're just the same, aren't we? So if
yeah.
we hear of a miracle, we don't quite believe it straight off hand, do we? We do question it. And there are lots of people that will spend, tie things in knots to make sure that it's not a miracle. So yeah, I mean, amazing, miraculous happenings aren't enough to convince people. I learned
Mm,
that a lot in baptism prep. When I used to ask people their life stories and things like that, some of them had had really miraculous things happen and yet
mm,
still weren't quite sure, still
mm,
would walk away. In fact, I know a handful of people that I would say I'd had events happen that I would think was amazing if it happened to me. And then 2 years later, they've walked away. It wasn't enough.
mm,
So
mm.
there is a question of what would it take? What does it take
Well,
for us
Jesus
to
sort of,
have
I
faith?
suppose this is the heart of this conversation in a way, isn't it? Because Jesus says, "I've told you, and you do not believe." Sorry, it's but you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep.
Ah, yes. So let's go on to sheep.
Come on, then, tell us about sheep because you know a little bit about sheep,
So
don't you?
he's not just come up with sheep out the blue either. He's been talking about sheep previously with "I am the good shepherd," hasn't he?
Yeah,
Let's just
absolutely. Well, of
go
course,
back.
and there's the whole thing of David the shepherd, and
But yeah,
in Jeremiah, there's God as the shepherd, isn't there? So the shepherd theme is a
I do just
one
think
through
in
the Old
this
Testament.
thing it sounds quite random as though he's just come up with sheep, but it is
No,
part of a
no,
different.
he has also been talking about sheep in the previous verses in
Yeah.
John 10. That's right. I'm the good shepherd, etc. Yeah.
So Middle Eastern shepherding.
Okay.
Okay, so you've lived in a Dale, so you know that the farmers come out in their quad bikes and round up the sheep, and they put them in
Yeah.
lovely fields with fences and gates and all that sort of thing. And actually, I believe still to this day, Palestinian shepherding, the sheep just wander. A little bit like we saw in the New Forest with
With the
the
ponies. Yeah, we were in the New
ponies.
Forest last week, so
Yeah.
we were seeing some.
But they just wander and they're all kind of labeled. And because the shepherd stays with them day and night, sleeps with them, and whatever, they know his voice and they just know him. So if they do just follow him, he calls them and they just follow. But then
Right.
if he meets another shepherd with their sheep and they all get mingled up, he can just walk off calling his sheep, and his sheep will follow him, and the other shepherd's sheep will follow them. And it all comes from how much time they spend together and the relationship that they have. And
Mm.
only time really creates relationship. Um,
Hmm.
and not miraculous time, just everyday living together
Mm.
means that it means that the shepherd will know his sheep and the sheep will know his shepherd. And I think
Mm.
I always feel that knowing that changes how I think of my relationship with Jesus, really. It's not always the miracles, it's the everyday living means that you know a little bit more about what Jesus would want and vice versa, really. Well, probably knows all of what I want. All things considered, being Jesus and all that.
Knows you better than you know yourself, Jenny.
Yeah, for all those hairs on my head.
All of that. Well, that's fine for you.
Yeah, but you get a bit closer, you know him better just by spending daily time with him.
I was thinking about this article that I read in the paper the other day about dogs. I think I read some of it out to you, didn't I? About also the way that, we've got a dog, Max, who is very cute and all that, haven't we? And of course, it's a similar sort. Maybe that's because obviously it's hard for us to relate to sheep, isn't it? Because we're not shepherds, right? But we do have this relationship. This thing was saying about how the dog's amazing success has been that they've made friends with us as humans, and that's why dogs have been so successful, kind of, as opposed to wolves who haven't made friends with us. And there are a lot more dogs in the world than there are wolves in the world. But again, it's that sort of relationship with us and our pets, isn't it? And it was talking about how dogs have a similar level of understanding to a 2-year-old. So they can't necessarily think beyond that. But 2-year-olds will recognize their parents, and a dog will recognize their owner. And this one dog who learned commands in Czech, and then went off to be an English-speaking family 10 years later, could still remember the commands in Czech. And I just thought that was interesting, and probably a way that we can relate to this, in a way, isn't it? In our culture with our animals, that they do know us and they hear us. And I think you're right. I think that's a really interesting point, that there is no substitute in building a relationship for time. That was true then, and even with all our modern technology, it's still true today, isn't it? If you want to have a relationship, you've got to commit the time to it.
Yeah, and if you want to relate it to dogs, I mean, so I got Max as a rescue dog. It does grow. The relationship with your dog does grow. I think it's probably easier if it's a puppy because it's cute, but simply spending time. And now we probably project too much of what he's thinking, but I think there's an element of it. I mean, I said this morning, it's strange to see how his mind works when he suddenly seems to remember things and then goes to find them. I'd love to know what's going on in his head, because sometimes he's just lying there quite happily, and then it's as though he's remembered something and he trots off to go and find it.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that relationship did grow over the years. And as I say, I think that's particularly when you've already got a fully formed dog. It's more
so Jesus is pretty clear, isn't he, really, here, that they're not believing. There seems to be something that it's almost like you've got to flick the switch in your brain, haven't you, to say, well, I am or am not part of, the sheepfold, as it were, or the animal pack. And then when you see it differently, don't you? It's sort of.
I don't know that it is. It's a switch of decision, isn't it? A decision to learn more daily. Because there is the juxtaposition, isn't there, of is it this one great big miraculous? They've seen the miracles and it hasn't done. But the sheep are actually a daily living and following. And maybe the switch is really the decision to start to learn more and to follow and to spend time with him and to listen and to accept but I don't think I'm not convinced of the switch that means that, I've decided that this is right and therefore it's going to be right in my mind forever, because I think we grow more in faith than that.
Yeah, I think that's also fair. So maybe there's a bit of both and. Because there is a sense here, isn't there, that they're not impressed by the miracles. They're not bothered about them. They don't see that as being key. Whereas we tend to think that it's a really interesting thing about the nature of faith, I think, in this passage, isn't there? If we tend to think that if we saw these miracles, we would believe. But actually, what Jesus says here to these people is, you've seen them, but you still don't believe, and you don't believe because you don't belong to my sheep.
And that's what I'm saying. I can tell you of people that have seen miracles and then have walked away. Don't believe it's not enough to keep people.
So there is an element there, isn't there, of belonging to the sheep, of making that, as you say, that decision to listen and to learn, but also a kind of day by day living that out. I'm not saying it's a one-time thing, because I think you're right. You don't get, so you have to join the sheepfold. You have to stay in the sheepfold. You have to stay listening to the voice. You have to stay. And how do we do that? Well, that's almost the kind of, I think I remember, someone saying once that every sermon ends up by saying, you should read your Bible and pray every day and go to church. Is this a sort of another one which ends up with, those things you've got to do, or
I think it's worth acknowledging that, the Christian faith is not a miracle a day faith, is it? You're not going to see some of it is just doing what we do every day. It's like, you're not always going to feel so amazingly close to God. You're not always going to feel, you're not always going to see every miracle. Unless you want parking spaces, but that's a whole different conversation.
No, you're just being naughty now. You're just being naughty.
But yeah,
got this amazing passage from John 10 about my sheep hearing my voice. I give them they know them, they follow me, and you're now talking about parking spaces. I don't know where to go with that, really, but anyway.
For those of you listening, I have a bit of an issue with people who pray for parking spaces. We'll probably discuss it at another point.
Well, okay, we can perhaps get into that another time.
But yeah, is that enough for you to do? You've got something to
well, I think just to say, I just think there's my sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. It's an amazing kind of promise, isn't it, that Jesus makes to us here?
Yeah, actually, that is a line that's worth picking up on. No one can snatch them out of my hand. So sheep can wander off, but no one's going to take you. I think, yeah, sheep can wander off, and you're right. Stay in the sheepfold. It's safe. It's nicer. It's very lovely. But
some of them, most of them, of course it is, yeah.
Lovely. It's lovely there.
And I guess that is where, being part of a Christian community, it is the day by day and the week by week stuff, isn't it? It is. We were talking the other day, weren't we, about, I must admit, when we were in the New Forest on Sunday, it was a little bit like, oh, we can go and do something else this morning, or let's go and have brunch, or but I remember, when I had a bit of time where I wasn't doing this role, and for a few weeks that seemed really good, but actually in the end I wanted to go back to be worshipping. It wasn't something that I could just walk away from, or there was a pull back, and I guess that is wanting to hear the voice again and wanting to be part of that.
And to be part of that community, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And community obviously is a very important thing, isn't it? And that's what we want to be about in terms of our church.
People always say, "Oh, you can pray at home," and we can pray at home, but it's not the same as being part of a community and praying as a community.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So there is a kind of call here, isn't there, to stay in the sheepfold, stay listening. And hopefully our churches at St Margaret's and Holy Trinity and others are a place where people can do that. And it's kind of reaffirming that again, I think, isn't it?
Good.
Well, I think that's fine. Yeah, we can think. I'm sure that so if you come along to St Margaret's on Sunday, sure we can hear some thoughts developed along that theme. So thanks for listening, and we will be back again next week. And we hope and pray that whatever you're doing on Sunday goes well.
Thank you. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. Please subscribe for more episodes on all the usual podcast platforms.